Mike Danton had made it. 23 years old, playing in the NHL, living every kid's dream. Then he tried to hire a hitman. The hitman was a cop wearing a wire. He got 7.5 years in federal prison. But the person he wanted dead? It was the one man who'd controlled him since he was 11 years old.
It's not an option to go to court. Okay. If we go to court, you're fucking done.
April 2004, and Mike Danton is about to make the worst decision of his life. He's 23 years old, playing for the St. Louis Blues in the Stanley Cup playoffs. While his team is in San Jose fighting to stay alive, Danton is making phone calls. He asks a woman he's been dating if she knows anyone who would do anything for $10,000. She hands the phone to a guy sitting next to her in a car, a part-time police dispatcher named Justin Jones. Danton tells him someone's coming to kill him over a debt, and he needs that person dealt with first.
Ron, it's Mike Danton calling here. Just want to let you know that he'll be there alone between 9 and 12. So that'd probably be the best time.
Jones doesn't hang up. He plays along, agrees to take the job, then immediately calls the FBI. They fit Jones with a wire and a fake gun, then send him to Danton's apartment in St. Louis. When Jones arrives and buzzes up, a man appears on the balcony, not Danton. Danton's still with the team. The man standing there is the one actually staying in the apartment, David Frost, Danton's agent, his former coach, the target. Within 48 hours, Danton is arrested at the San Jose airport on conspiracy to commit murder. The judge at his sentencing would later say, "I do not believe in over 18 years on the bench, I have been faced with a case as bizarre as this one." And he was right, because the question wasn't about the crime itself. The crime was sloppy and doomed from the start. The real question was, what could drive a 23-year-old professional athlete to this level of desperation? Everyone assumed it was about money. None of them were even close. The real story starts 13 years earlier, when a 10-year-old boy met the man who would take over his entire life. David Frost didn't start as an agent. He started as a peewee hockey coach in Toronto, back when Mike was still going by his real name, Mike Jefferson. Frost first approached Mike's parents, Steve and Sue Jefferson, in 1991, recruiting their son for a minor hockey team called the Toronto Young Nationals. Mike was 10 years old. Frost was in his early 20s, running a hockey school in Brampton, Ontario, and coaching young players with a level of intensity that stood out even by hockey standards. He broke down game tape with the kids like they were professionals and promised parents he could take their sons all the way to the NHL. Steve Jefferson believed him. He later recalled watching his son's first game under Frost's coaching and being stunned by the transformation on the ice. But Frost's influence didn't stay on the ice. One of the first rules Frost drilled into his players was simple. Don't talk to your parents about hockey, because they don't know anything about the game. By the time Mike was 15, the relationship with his family had collapsed. He moved in with Frost and Frost's wife, and the distance from his parents became permanent. At 21 years old, Mike legally changed his name to Michael Sage Danton, taking the last name from a 13-year-old boy he'd met at one of Frost's hockey camps because he thought the name sounded cool. He told people he would never play in the NHL with the name Jefferson on his back. Danton cut off all contact with his parents, his younger brother Tom, and his entire extended family. He referred to his biological parents only as Steve and Sue, and said publicly that he didn't consider them family. Meanwhile, Frost had gotten himself certified as an NHLPA player agent in 2002, despite having been banned from one amateur hockey league for forging documents and having pleaded guilty to assaulting one of his own players in 1997. He became Danton's official agent, and the control that had started on the ice now extended to every corner of Danton's life. Danton was earning NHL money with the New Jersey Devils and later the St. Louis Blues, but Frost decided where that money went. When Frost was later caught using Danton's personal credit card to buy gas at a station in Ontario, Danton told the court that Frost had his full permission to use it. But Frost wasn't just doing this to Mike. He had a system, and Mike was just one piece of it. Mike Danton wasn't Frost's only project. He wasn't even his first. The group that followed Frost from minor hockey through the junior ranks became known around Ontario as the Brampton Boys. Along with Danton, the core included Sheldon Keefe, who would later become an NHL head coach, and 3 others. All of them showed the same patterns. bizarre behavior in locker rooms and an almost complete inability to function without checking in with Frost first. In Barrie, teammates would find Danton in full uniform, phone pressed to his ear, taking instructions from Frost minutes before puck drop. They started calling him and the other Frost players cancers. Not because they couldn't play, because they couldn't think for themselves. And Mike, he had it worse than any of them, because Mike never got away. Then, in the summer of 2000, something happened that should have ended Frost permanently. Mike's younger brother Tom was 13 years old. He visited Frost's cottage for a weekend retreat with older players. Tom came home moody and withdrawn. When his parents eventually got their hands on photographs from that weekend, one showed Frost pointing a rifle at the boy. Another showed Tom bound to a bed with duct tape. The photos were turned over to authorities. An investigation followed. Frost and 5 witnesses dismissed it as a hazing ritual that had been the boy's idea. The investigation was closed. Mike saw those photos. He knew what Frost was, and he still couldn't leave. That's how deep the control went. In August 2006, 2 years after Danton's arrest, Ontario Provincial Police finally charged Frost with 12 counts of sexual exploitation. The trial judge ultimately acquitted Frost, ruling that witness testimony appeared tainted by collusion. But even in handing down the acquittal, the judge said the case had exposed a dark and very unhealthy side of hockey that was extremely offensive and must be denounced. Frost walked out of that courtroom a free man. Danton, by then, had already been sitting in a federal prison cell for over 2 years. If Danton was the one behind bars, why did it feel like he was the one who'd been trapped all along? What happened in court revealed just how deep the damage went. On July 16, 2004, 3 months after his arrest, Danton stood before U.S. District Judge William Steele in East St. Louis and pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit a federal crime. The agreed sentence was 7.5 years in federal prison, 90 months, with no possibility of parole under the American system. Katie Wolfmeyer went to trial separately that September. A federal jury acquitted her after 3 hours of deliberation. Danton did not testify at her trial. The judge had ruled he wasn't required to. But what was striking wasn't the legal technicality. It was the fact that even after pleading guilty, even facing nearly a decade behind bars, Danton never said a word against Frost in any courtroom. A week after his arrest, Danton had made a recorded phone call from custody to Frost. The CBC program, The Fifth Estate, later obtained transcripts of that conversation and dozens of others between the two. In the recordings, Frost can be heard coaching Danton on what to say to lawyers and counselors, managing the narrative from the outside. At the end of one call, Frost demanded that Danton say, "I love you," before hanging up. Danton said it.
You love me? Yeah. Say it. Okay. Do you? Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Think about that. He's sitting in a jail cell, facing 7 years, and he's still performing for the man who put him there. Even behind bars, Frost owned him. That's not loyalty. That's Stockholm Syndrome with a hockey stick. Danton was sent to the Federal Correctional Institute in Sandstone, Minnesota, where he spent the next 5 years. Inside, something began to shift. He started working with a clinical psychiatrist and a psychologist who helped him examine his childhood and the dynamics of his relationship with Frost for the first time. He later described the experience in direct terms. The psychiatrist helped me get in touch with a different way of thinking. Previously, I had been extremely impulsive and barely thought of repercussions. The change in my personality was incredible. He took correspondence courses through Queen's University. He became a certified first aid responder after learning from prison nurses how to treat inmates going through medical emergencies. Correctional officials in both the United States and Canada described him as a model prisoner who tutored other inmates and worked to improve conditions inside. In March 2009, after 5 years at Sandstone, Danton was transferred to the Pittsburgh Institution in Joyceville, Ontario. Under Canadian law, he was now eligible for parole. On September 11, 2009, the National Parole Board granted him full release with 2 conditions that said everything about the case. No contact of any kind with his father, Steve Jefferson, and no face-to-face meetings with David Frost. Mike went in as someone who couldn't function without Frost. He came out as someone else entirely. For the first time since he was 10 years old, Mike Danton was on his own. When he walked out of the Pittsburgh institution in September 2009, Danton was 28 years old with a high school education, no career, no money, and a federal conviction on his record. He moved into a friend's condo in Toronto and later admitted he had no idea if anyone would want him in any way for anything ever again.
Who's ever going to want to befriend me? Who's ever going to want to marry me?
Then the phone started ringing. Canadian universities were calling, offering him a chance to play hockey and get a degree. St. Mary's University in Halifax took the lead. Athletic director Steve Sardi didn't make the decision lightly, but he landed on a simple principle. If we say no to Mike Danton, who are we going to say yes to? Danton enrolled in January 2010, joined the Huskies varsity hockey team, and scored a goal in his very first game back. That March, the Huskies defeated the Alberta Golden Bears to win the 2010 University Cup, the school's first national championship. Danton was named an academic All-Canadian with a 3.9 grade point average. He chose a double major in psychology and criminology, driven directly by what he'd been through. He later said, "I used to take hockey for granted, as well as a lot of things for granted. It really changed the way I think." He kept playing professionally after university, signing contracts in Sweden, Austria, Slovakia, Poland, and Kazakhstan, always studying remotely while competing. In Sweden, during his first game with a third division club called IFK Or, his teammate Marcus Bengtsson took a hit and collapsed on the ice with convulsions. Danton dropped to his knees, waited for the player's jaw to unclench, and used the first aid training he'd learned in prison to clear the airway and keep Bengtsson from choking. The skills he learned while locked up for planning to take a life ended up saving one. In 2015, he married his girlfriend Nancy. They have 2 children. In 2016, he graduated from St. Mary's summa cum laude. He went on to run the Mike Danton Hockey Academy in Halifax, coaching young players with a philosophy built on respect and accountability, the opposite of everything he experienced growing up under Frost. As for Frost, he was acquitted on all charges, resigned from the NHLPA, and was later discovered operating under the alias Jim McCauley at a hockey academy in Laguna Niguel, California. He has never publicly accepted responsibility for anything. So, was it worth it? 7.5 years for a failed murder plot? Mike would probably tell you yes, because those 5 years in a Minnesota prison were the only time since he was 10 years old that someone wasn't telling him who to be. The kid who went in couldn't function without Frost. The man who came out saved a life with the skills he learned inside. Prison didn't destroy Mike Danton. It was the only thing that could save him. If this story hit you, Skates and Scars has more where this came from. Subscribe, because the next one cuts even deeper.